Welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. Here are your hosts, Jeffrey Tobias Halter and Amanda Hammett.
Well, good afternoon. Today we are talking to Samantha Pitre Quillen, who is my longtime friend, about workplace stress and hybrid work and talent management. My name is Amanda Hammett, and today I have to refresh and refuel with a little bit of agua today. But Jeffrey, let me imbibe with you. What are you drinking today?
Yeah, you're on the road. I'm actually sitting at home having a nice Pinot Grigio, relaxing at the end of a, fairly stress-free summer day. So life's pretty good in Atlanta right now, other than the heat. But I'm excited for our show because it's all about workplace stress and what people are going through. And isn't that why we created Wind Down Wednesday? So we want everybody who's listening to just sit back and enjoy with their beverage of choice. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Samantha Pitre Quillen. She is a career coach who advises companies on workplace culture. She's an executive coach and a C-suite human resource professional with over 15 years of experience in facilitating various aspects of an employee life cycle, including talent management, retention, employee relations, leadership development, creating organizational structure, recruiting, process and policy creation, and succession planning. There's nothing we could ask her that she hasn't experienced. I love this intro. So Samantha, welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. What's your beverage of choice?
Thank you guys so much for having me. My beverage of choice is actually I'll call it our house cocktail. We discovered in the pandemic, LaCroix, any flavor you like, tequila, and a splash of Sprite. So that's what I'm drinking today.
Wow,
that's a strong.
We call it we jokingly call it. It's actually the name of my husband's company. So we call it the Quillen 5149 because there's going to be some level of imbalance some point in the evening if you have to mix up.
Well, that's a great reference point to talk about stress, burnout, and really let's start by talking about your current work and what led you to take on this really important work.
Sure. I had been a human resources professional forever, in addition to, or what felt like forever. And I kept seeing the same cycles. I saw people come in hugely excited and wildly thrilled about their new opportunity. And 6 months later, I saw frazzled, over-meetinged, really high stress folks that were not those bright, energetic, creative people that we hired. And I started to look at our retention numbers, our attrition numbers, and realized that folks weren't necessarily leaving because they weren't getting great projects or they weren't being challenged. It was being that they were overly challenged or just not able to manage the day-to-day that was their lives. And I began to notice that if these were the problems that my company and the companies of my colleagues were having, that this was a real problem and epidemic widespread. And realized that a lot of companies know it, see it, can identify it, but don't know how to fix it. And I thought I had some creative ways and some really innovative ideas around how to fix it. And so I kind of launched into this arena for just that. And then the pandemic hit. And it became even more important and made me realize that this work was even more critical.
Samantha, I've had the pleasure of knowing you all these years, and I will say that you have always been a very passionate but a very direct person, and I love that about you. But what I would love to know, and what I'd love for you to directly tell our audience here is, let's talk a little bit about your work. Let's talk about some of the clients that you're working with, and specifically some success stories. I think that people are a little overwhelmed with this idea of workplace stress and what do you actually do? How do you actually move forward? So if you could give them maybe a glimmer of hope, we'll move from there.
Yeah. So my clients are mainly folks that are in the sweet spot of startups, which I love because they are building and growing and creating culture and can really define it from the ground up. So one of my clients, for instance, is a great marketing technology startup that launched from Paris here in the US about 3 or 4 years ago. And so they have about 250 US employees now. They've made some acquisitions. And so they've needed to fold in some various smaller companies into a bigger company culture. And so I think what I've been most proud of is the ability to not just replicate what they had in Paris, but make that really tangible for a global audience that incorporates culture, local culture, as well as the company culture that their CEO would really like to create. And one of the things that I do with all of my clients when I onboard them is to spend a week on site. And if on site is in their virtual space or in their actual physical space. And the reason I like to do that is because I just like to observe. I like to understand, how do you guys conduct meetings? How do we do these things? And so something I pointed out for that client was, why are we scheduling your staff meeting? Their staff meeting was at 10. Which was only supposed to go to 11, but they all agreed that historically it goes till 12:30. And then there is a senior leadership meeting, and then there's an executive team meeting. So certain people were pretty much in a meeting their entire day. And so my question was, one, do we need to do that? Two, who can we use as, I want us to try some things, and I want half of the team for the next month to send a representative. So I broke them into two groups. I had them, one team was A, one team was B. And so the A's every even week of the month had to send a representative, and every odd week, the B team sent a representative. And it was great. And I asked them afterwards about what the overall feeling was. And they were like, this was great. I got time back on my calendar. I got to develop my staff. I got we have all these wins. People have new ideas about projects that they weren't at the table in before. And someone said, well, why does that work? And I was like, because A, you're not doing your best work. B, your team wants those kinds of opportunities. And the reality was that nobody had ever stopped to think about, do I have to be in this meeting? So we implemented a new policy, which was every individual got to say, am I the best person to be in this meeting? And that was, so we sort of had these, am I the best, right? ... And we scheduled and blocked out company-wide 20 minutes every week where the entire company sat down to look at their desk and assess, am I the best? Am I the best person to be working on this project? Am I the best person to be going to this meeting? Am I the best use of our resources, particularly our human resources? And so those kinds of initiatives get teams thinking. And so when they do that individually for something like the senior leadership meeting and the executive team meeting, they start to do that across the board. So you have people moving the puzzle pieces themselves and saying, hey, you know what, Joe, you don't know that I can do this, but in my previous role, 2-3 jobs down the line, I did something similar and can bring that experience. I think I would be great to do that. So it works both ways. It works with people thinking about what am I the best at and raising their hand, as well as people eliminating themselves from other things and nominating other people to do that.
That's great.
Wow, that's a great best example. We're gonna pry into some more best in class examples as our show goes on. One thing I wanted to ask you about, earlier this year, we did a show on the McKinsey Women in the Workforce study. And the research showed that many underrepresented groups, specifically women of color, were actually more hesitant to come back to live workplaces because of the drama that it entailed. Or if you were an only in the room, it was even more. And so we've got this issue of coming back to work, compounded by many times the groups who want people back in person are predominantly white males who aren't feeling any of this. So based on your work, based on your expertise, what are you hearing, and how do we resolve this and bring a solution to this?
Sure. I mean, I'm hearing much of a similar sentiment. Many people are are not excited to return to work because of the drama, the microaggressions, the overt aggressions, the feelings of the network that we all know about. And just some of the political pieces, which I think when you look at women and women of color in particular, we are not conditioned to play. We are not conditioned to play these political games that are so important to leadership, to rising to the point of leadership and getting seats at the table and making that impact. So this virtual space has eliminated some of that. And people are really leaning into that, where they can go, they can do the work that they need to do, they can put their heads down, they can focus on the rest of their lives in addition to that. But I think if we are not, and when I say we, I mean corporate cultures, no matter what size, if we're not changing how we promote, how we assign projects, how we really appreciate and show and recognize talent, if we're not changing what that looks like culturally, we are doing ourselves a disservice. And it is most importantly going to hurt those women of color and women in general, but specifically women of color. And so I think we have to be really intentional about how we both set up structures for recognition, set up structures for promotion, and how we make that not just who we know, like, and trust. And we know that that is how people get hired. We know that that is how people get promoted. We understand that that's just human nature. So I think we have to be intentional about how we get to know folks so that we can be sure that we are knowing and liking and trusting those specific individuals. And that has to be intentional. I also think we have to incentivize senior leadership around promotion and development. If my metrics are not directly tied to coaching, mentorship, and promotion of my team members and elevation of those team members, then I am not inclined to do those. And I think that that is why you often see managers missing one-on-ones, managers directing one-on-one conversation times to just be about reporting in and out on projects and on metrics and on the things that they get measured for. And so I think companies have to really be intentional about incentivizing and sort of judging performance around the development of teams as well. If you have a team member that's been sitting in the same seat for 24, 36 months and not progressing, you should not be able to be recognized as a top people leader if that's the case. And the final piece is, I think we have to really think about how we are structuring and talking about developmental dollars. Some organizations have gone to giving developmental money, but many have still not. And some are not giving it as freely, I would say, as they should, right? So they're like, hey, if you go back to school and get this degree or an MBA or those kinds of things, or these specific sets of certifications, like if you go back and get Lean Six, we will we'll pay for that. But the idea that we go back and get a leadership certificate from pick a school, or a diversity, equity, inclusion piece from, Cornell has an amazing program with a big price tag. And so if you could offset that cost for someone, they might be interested in leaning into that. Also, I think we have to start talking about things like coaching. We've got to start talking about coaching for our staff at lower levels. While I appreciate senior leadership being coached, that's my business, right? Executive coaching. But I think we need to start bringing it down. And we need to start bringing it down closer and closer to the boots on the ground so that they can understand how coaching, even as a person who has not yet gotten to senior leadership, is so vital.
I love that. Gosh, there's so many things that you brought up there. And I would love to dive into just some even more specific things, because I think that these are things that we know intellectually, but it's really how do we put them into day-to-day practice? So Samantha, if you were going to give advice to, let's say, a middle manager, frontline leader, what can be done within their culture, within their subculture of their teams to help these particular groups continue to rise?
I think number one is to be very clear about what people's ultimate goals are. What is it that your team members specifically want to do long term? Mm-hmm. And really thinking about creating developmental plans that will help them get there while leveraging their current job. And that really is about moving from what do you need to do your job to how do we build your skills, and really focusing on skill building as opposed to just kind of what are the job description requirements? What are those core proficiencies? Number two, I think, is to earmark at least one preferably two, but one definitely, or a specific amount of time in each one-on-one interaction with talking about development, talking about that team member's development, not talking about just where are you with your projects, but what are you learning? What do you need to be learning? What would you like to be learning? How can I better serve you? So that's number two. And my final piece is, when you look at your budgets, look for ways that you can infuse real opportunities for your team members. And I say that, right? Let's get pizza parties or lunches or, DoorDash gift cards. And let's go to real opportunities for maybe low-cost conference attendance. Maybe bringing in someone like myself that you can barter with, that you can, that can really share some things, beta test some things with your team. Leverage your team as, an opportunity for folks that are testing new things out, and invite them to come and talk to your team. Use team meetings for learning, in addition to just what do we need to cover for the sake of getting the job done.
So dozens of other questions and never enough time. So this is such an important topic and we have to wrap up, but we're going to invite Samantha back on a future show very quickly. So Samantha, for now, on behalf of Amanda and I, we just want to thank you for joining us. For our listeners, you'll find out more information on Samantha Pitre Quillen and her work by following her on LinkedIn at Samantha Pitre Quillen. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back again real soon. So thank you, Samantha.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks again for joining us for Wind Down Wednesdays, a contemporary midweek discussion on current workplace and marketplace issues with a focus on diversity, inclusion, intersectionality, and equality. I'm Amanda Hammett, and on behalf of myself and Jeffrey Tobias Halter, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining us for Wind Down Wednesday. If you like this episode, please subscribe to receive more episodes straight to your inbox.